after all this time of waiting. With an announcement months and months ago, finally we get to see what Tailwords have been working on with perhaps the most game-changing update for Bannerlords so far, and specifically its single-player campaign. With new battle terrain, the order of battle, battle morale, battles every which way, it is better than ever. And it came in the form of almost like a hidden patch. But today I'm going to be going through everything that has been added in this massive update. So let's get straight into the video. First of all, I'm going to go straight to the battle terrain system because I think that's the main thing that people have been waiting for. This was announced months ago now, where the battles in the game would relate to where your party is on the campaign map. For example, if your troops are one side of a bridge and the enemy are another, that would reflect in the battles themselves when you go down to command in the field. This is something that we've seen before in a game like Rome Total War that sort of pioneered it, but was never really done in any other game since, or at least to that level. And I have to be very realistic here. It's still not to that level. This is the first iteration of this battle terrain system in Bannerlord, and it's not perfect. It has its issues, but the gist of it kind of works. The spawn positions and facing directions of the attacking and defending sides inside the field battle missions are now determined by the encounter position on the campaign map. There was some of this in the early access for Bannerlord. For example, if you're going to fight someone and on the world map there was just grass, you'd fight in a grassy mapland. Or if you were moving through the desert in the Azerite territory, when you go into the battles, you'd be fighting on sand. And it kind of works like that, but there was such a limited amount of battle scenes that have been created by Tailwords that it didn't always work. If there were trees or forests somewhere, it wouldn't necessarily have trees or forests on the battle map itself. But now that has been improved, even with smaller things. If you're on the edge of a forest on the campaign map and you go into a battle, you'll see that forest next to you and sometimes you'll be able to use it. But the main thing really is for directions of armies. If there's another army coming to reinforce an enemy or even you, they will spawn in on the battle map the same direction that they were on the overall campaign map. They've been able to do this by adding in 23 new battle scenes for more recognizable regions. This increases the total to 72 different battle scenes. They're looking to further expand the pool though later on in time, and you do kind of get this. It's cool. It works all right, but it doesn't work every time. For example, sometimes you'll get a moment where you'll have a bridge and it will work, but the bridge could be wooden where on the campaign map it's a stone bridge. These things don't matter all that much, but that kind of detail would be nice to see later on, differentiating between the different type of bridges that we see in the campaign map translating to the battles themselves. Or even sometimes I'd be fighting what I thought would be a bridge battle on the campaign map, but going into the battles themselves there would be no bridge. There would be water and rivers, but no bridge to see. So it is kind of hit and miss what works and what doesn't so far with battle terrain. But of course this just comes with adding more and more scenes later on in the game. We saw in their first announcement video of this new feature that the game is split into way more segments, and they can get even more detailed later on, but of course that takes development time. But for the basic version of battle terrain, it's a good step in the right direction. I think it really immerses you way more, and all the different scenes that they've added in, even if they don't quite exactly translate to what you can see on the campaign map, they're still cool and different, and there's a lot of detail and work that's been put into them. But next is the order of battle system, a new deployment screen that's been added to appear before every battle mission if the player's side of the encounter has at least 20 troops. It won't happen with your small bandit battles at the beginning, but as soon as you start to build up your army, you're doing bigger and bigger battles, this new deployment scene will come into action. You can divide your troops by troop types into different formations. You have different sliders, so you can put maybe 5% of your archers in one group or 10% of your archers in another group. You can put maybe 40% of your archers in one position and then the rest in a different squad. These can be led by different NPCs if you've got them recruited within your party. Players can also give preferences to shield, spear throwing and heavy troops in these formations. For example, you can have multiple different infantry squads, yet just using the slider will put a mix of peasants and heavy armors in the same infantry squad. Maybe you want just a heavily armored infantry squad and then all the peasants and your recruits can be put in their own squad so they're not quite put on the front line. You can do this now by selecting preference to heavy soldiers in one squad and spears in another, for example. Then on the deployment screen, you can also give formation orders. Maybe you want to put them in loose formation or shield formation before the battle begins. And of course, you can decide where you want them to be. The formation cards in the order UI has now been improved as well, including an explicit number of troops with their types, ammo bar, and morale of the formation. Speaking of morale, this is something that's also been completely overhauled. Troops will now slowly regain lost morale up to half of their initial morale within battles. So when you're starting to lose, your troops can see men dying left left, right, and center, and they're thinking, we're not going to win here. Sometimes they'll run away. Their morale will start to drop, and when it gets to a certain point, they can bolt and run. But they can start to slowly regain it if, of course, you either see your troops winning, or they get out of the battle and they're able to see a bit more of a light at the end of this dark, dark tunnel. They will start to regain that morale, but only up to half of what they started with. Ranged kills, though, now provide morale to the killer's allies, just like melee kills. So if you have a whole group of archers and they send volleys and volleys down onto the enemy, your troops will be ecstatic. You're doing great. This used to only be a thing with melee kills, and of course they'd have better morale. So your troops could see their allies getting more and more melee kills, which would give them more and more morale to keep fighting, but this now works with ranged as well. Fire ballistas now deal a hell of a lot more morale damage, and of course it's been adjusted with the morale damage for different weapon types. So bigger, bulkier weapons like hammers and maces are going to deal much worse morale damage to the enemy than just a sword or a dagger or something like that. They're the three main things that have been added in. There are so many other things. For example, increasing the effectiveness of starvation siege tactics. Of course, you could siege someone in an all-out assault before in Bannerlord, or you could decide to maybe just wait and starve them out with a risk that reinforcements could later come. But now garrison parties won't die from this starvation tactic. The garrison of the castle you are sieging will now just become wounded. They'll become weaker and thus easier to fight if you eventually do go onto that assault phase. Towns will now show the food stored in their market to correctly indicate the amount of food left in said town, giving a better idea of when starvation will begin. You can choose your tactics a bit better on which direction you want to go when you're sieging certain castles. And of course, the final big thing is the new fixes of siege ladders and siege towers. I made a full video going in depth about this, how Tailwards have finally fixed how troops go up ladders. There's no more swarming or bugging out at the bottom. They actually use all three ladders on the back of those big siege towers. They don't bug out at the bottom. It is amazing. So much less mosh pitting. It's not perfect so far, but Tailwards have done a great job of actually fixing ladders, and it's made sieges way more fun to play. But as I said, I made a full video on that. But one final thing that I thought was pretty cool that I wanted to add in, there's now the option to slow down whilst giving orders. When you're telling your troops to move from one place to another, what position or formation you want them to be in, whether it's shield wall, tight formation, the game can now slow down up to 75%. It looks kind of cool. It makes it a little bit easier. Some people might not like it, but that's why it's just an option. It can be turned off, but if you want a bit of an easier game, having this on could make it a little bit easier to manage your armies, especially in the heat of battle on those bigger sieges or field battles. But what do you think of this new update? I think this is one of the best new updates they've added to the single player for quite some time. I can't wait to play around with it more, and as I said, I'll be bringing out more in-depth videos looking detailed at exactly what each of these new things do. So make sure you stick around the channel for that. But leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, leave a dislike if you didn't. But until then, I will see you in the next one.